George III was born on June 4, 1738, in London, England, to Frederick, Prince of Wales, and Princess Augusta of Saxe-Gotha. He was the eldest son of his parents and had a younger brother, William Henry, who later became Duke of Gloucester. He ascended to the throne on October 25, 1760, at the age of 22, following the death of his grandfather, King George II. He was the first British monarch to be born in England since the reign of Queen Anne. George III was the first Hanoverian king to be born and raised in England and to speak English as his first language. His father, Frederick, Prince of Wales, died when he was only 13 years old, leaving him as the heir apparent to the throne. George III's reign was a constitutional monarchy, ruled by the ministerial government and prominent men in Parliament. George stated in his accession speech, "Born and educated in this country, I glory in the name of Britain." He inserted this into his speech to distance himself from his Hanoverian forebears. George III married Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz in 1761, and they had 15 children. Their eldest son, George, later became King George IV. Charlotte was a devoted wife and mother, and the couple had a happy marriage. They purchased Buckingham House in 1762 as a family retreat, on the grounds where Buckingham Palace now stands. During his reign, the American colonies declared their independence, following on from the Boston Tea Party, leading to the Revolutionary War, which lasted from 1775 to 1783. George III was determined to maintain British control over the colonies, and the war resulted in a significant loss of British territory and influence in North America. George III suffered from periods of mental illness, which some historians believe was caused by a genetic disorder called porphyria. He experienced several episodes of mania and depression throughout his reign, which affected his ability to govern effectively. The king's mental instability led to a power struggle within the government, as different factions vied for control of the monarchy. His illness made him vulnerable to manipulation and led to a breakdown in trust between the king and his ministers. Despite his illness, George III was able to oversee important social and economic reforms, including the abolition of slavery in the British Empire in 1807. In 1807, George signed into law an act for the abolition of the slave trade, under which the transatlantic slave trade was banned in the British Empire. Between 1791 and 1800, almost 400,000 Africans were shipped to the Americas by 1,300 slaving voyages mounted from British ports like Liverpool and Bristol. George III struggled for 20 years to get the ban signed. He was opposed by others who had vested interests in the trade. George never bought or sold a slave or had any shares in slave companies. In the 1750s he wrote an article denouncing the arguments for the slave trade as ridiculous and absurd. He also supported the establishment of public hospitals and schools and encouraged the growth of agriculture and industry. He was also a patron of the arts and sciences and supported the establishment of the Royal Academy of Arts and the Royal Society. George III was a keen collector of art and books and was particularly interested in astronomy and chemistry. During his reign some of the greatest names in English literature came of age: Jane Austen, Byron, Keats, Wordsworth and Shelley. George III was a devout Christian and believed in the importance of religion in public life. He was a member of the Church of England and supported missionary work in the colonies. He opposed Catholic emancipation and the repeal of the Test and Corporation Acts, which discriminated against non-Anglican Protestants. He believed that the Church of England was essential to the stability of the state and saw religious tolerance as a threat to its authority. The king's long reign saw significant changes in British society, including the Industrial Revolution and the growth of the British Empire. He presided over a period of great social and economic change, which transformed Britain into a modern industrial nation. George III's foreign policy was dominated by the struggle against Napoleon, who sought to conquer Europe. He formed alliances with other European powers and supported the Duke of Wellington in his campaigns against the French. In 1805 Nelson defeated Napoleon's navy in the Battle of Trafalgar. Despite being outnumbered, Nelson triumphed, and this victory curtailed the threat of invasion from Napoleon's forces. The victory confirmed the naval supremacy Britain had established during the course of the 18th century under George III's reign. In 1815, Wellington defeated Napoleon's army in the Battle of Waterloo, which marked the end of the Napoleonic Wars. The king's health declined in the later years of his reign, and he became blind and deaf. He withdrew from public life and spent much of his time at Windsor Castle, where he received visits from his family and close friends. In 1810, his son, the future George IV, was appointed Prince Regent to govern in his place due to the king's illness. The Prince Regent was widely unpopular with the British public, and his extravagance and profligacy tarnished the reputation of the monarchy. Despite his declining health, George III continued to take an active interest in the affairs of state and corresponded regularly with his ministers. He remained deeply committed to his role as king, even as his mental and physical health deteriorated. The king's mental illness was a source of great concern for his family and government, and his doctors employed a range of treatments to try and alleviate his symptoms. These included bloodletting, purging, and the use of straitjackets. In 1788, George III suffered a severe mental breakdown, and his doctors were forced to place him under restraint. He recovered after several months, but his illness continued to plague him for the rest of his life. George III's long reign and personal virtues earned him the nickname, the Good King. He was seen as a symbol of stability and continuity in a period of great change, and his reign saw the consolidation of Britain's global power and influence. George III died at Windsor Castle on January 29, 1820, at the age of 81, after a reign of 59 years. He was succeeded by his son, George IV, who was crowned king later that year. George III's legacy as a monarch and statesman remains a subject of debate among historians, with some praising his achievements and others criticizing his policies and leadership style. He is mainly known for the disastrous loss of the American colonies. However, he is widely regarded as one of Britain's most significant monarchs and a key figure in the country's history.